The tension in the TV debate studio was palpable. Under the glaring lights of the stage, two of the most polarizing figures in contemporary America faced each other, ready for a television discussion that would shake the nation to its core. On one side sat Bernie Sanders, 84 years old, with his unruly shock of white hair and his signature professorial cadence. He was no longer just the face of a movement. He had become a symbol of a yearning for social and economic order. He entered the stage in his worn suit, a cool, calculated, and determined presence. He hadn't come to discuss, he had come to dominate. Across from him sat Jason Momoa, not the silent action star people knew from the big screen, but a man who, after years in the spotlight, had found the courage to take on a different kind of responsibility as a voice of reason in a time of great division. A former champion for environmental and cultural causes, the son of a native Hawaiian, a man who had never bought his acclaim but had always earned it. And now he sat there, still upright with an inner calm that was provocative. Subscribe for your mom, dad, or grandchild. If you subscribe, may God give you $10,000. What happened in the next 30 seconds would be seen on a loop across social media. Not because it was loud, but because it was real and because it changed everything. Mr. Momoa, Sanders began with a voice that was pure and direct. Perhaps it's time you stop pretending to understand what it means to be a working American and return to where you came from. The sentence didn't drop, it exploded. A murmur ran through the studio. The host, bewildered, caught her breath. Viewers across the country paused. On Twitter, a firestorm erupted. "Go back to Hollywood" began to trend. Many called it one of the most classist statements ever made live on American television. But Jason Momoa, he didn't flinch. No frown, no smile, just that quiet, unwavering silence. The kind of silence that makes people nervous, the kind of calm that comes from someone who no longer has anything to prove. For what he was about to say next would not only shake Sanders' political foundation, but also cast an uncomfortable light on the question, who truly belongs to this country and who gets to decide? Jason Momoa's journey could not have been more different from that of his opponent. Born in Hawaii, raised with an appreciation for his heritage, he was shaped by discipline, not privilege. No connections, no special favors, just hard will, clear principles, and an iron work ethic. Even as a young man, he stood on the stage under the relentless sun, practicing alone while others slept. He worked his way up not through volume, but through precision, not through drama, but through deeds. He became a star not by chance, but by determination. He was never the loudest in the room, but when it mattered, people listened to him. After his acting career took off, he began advocating for environmental protection, cultural preservation, and social awareness. No grand speeches, no political affiliation, just facts, responsibility, and a deep sense of justice. This is why he was appointed to the Expert Commission on Cultural Affairs in Congress, not because of his fame, but because of his integrity. But not everyone was thrilled about it. Too independent, some said, too inconvenient, and most of all, not the image one had of a political advisor. For Jason Momoa was not loud, he was effective, and that's exactly what made him dangerous to those who preferred to believe in superficialities. Bernie Sanders made the same mistake many before him had. He underestimated the man who sat across from him. This debate was more than just a dispute between two personalities. It was a symbol of America in our time. A country torn between belonging and exclusion, between origin and stance. Not a political show, but a cultural earthquake. Live on air. This is just one story, but there are dozens more to come. Subscribe to see them all. Sanders appeared as a voice for those who believe America is losing its way, that everything is moving too fast, that tradition is fading and identity is being diluted, that only those whose family histories are deeply rooted in the American soil can truly understand what the country needs. But across from him sat someone he couldn't categorize, a man who didn't fit into the mold. No party card, no loud voice, just a life full of discipline, loyalty, and deeds. Jason Momoa was not an heir to a system. He was its living refutation, the proof that home is not inherited but earned, not through blood but through stance, not through name but through decisions. The topic of the debate was actually cultural preservation, a seemingly safe terrain for Sanders. He had often given statements about social programs, wealth taxes, and economic stability, but Momoa didn't just have statements, he had experiences. The host opened the debate calmly. The first few minutes went by routinely, party lines, well-rehearsed phrases. Sanders spoke first. "America needs leadership that thinks like an American," he said. "Our jobs are being outsourced, our factories are being ignored, and working people are paying the price." Then it was Momoa's turn, calmly, unhurriedly, precisely. "I have spent my life learning to recognize real threats, not imagined ones. What is dangerous is not determined by wealth or by our background, but by our actions, by our structures, by our systems." He paused. "We protect our country not through fear, but through truth." His voice wasn't loud, no pathos, no acting, but every word carried weight. Then the air in the studio changed. The host asked the next question. It was about the social policies of the last administration, and it was at that very moment that Sanders struck. "We finally need people in politics," he said as his gaze turned sharply and cuttingly towards Jason Momoa, "who truly understand what American values mean, people whose loyalty is never in question." In the audience, the first signs of unease stirred. Individual glances became fixed. It grew quieter, but Momoa remained motionless. "Not yet," he answered calmly. "I believe my life speaks for itself. I have served my country through my art, through my activism for society with every decision I've made. I've never asked for applause, I've just done my part. If that isn't loyalty, then I don't know what is." But Sanders didn't let up. He had a plan and would see it through to the end, whatever the cost. "It's easy to say you're loyal," he continued. "But true Americans don't have to prove it. They feel it in their bones." The sentence fell like a gunshot. "True Americans?" The studio fell silent. The host shifted forward in her chair. In the control room, eyebrows raised. On Twitter, it exploded, "True Americans, #We're America, towards pride through contribution." Jason Momoa's jaw tightened for just a moment. Then his voice came, cool, razor-sharp. "Mr. Sanders," he said, "are you seriously suggesting that American citizenship is a matter of heritage and not of values, duties, or willingness to sacrifice?" Sanders didn't hesitate. No backpedaling. On the contrary, he doubled down on his attack. "I say," he answered with a sharp voice, "some of us feel America in our very marrow. Others have to learn it from books." A murmur went through the rows. A woman in the front row put her hand to her mouth in shock. A cameraman unintentionally mumbled into an open mic, "Damn, this isn't a normal debate anymore." It had become personal, and it was far from over. Bernie Sanders had crossed the red line, and Jason Momoa was about to show him how a true patriot responds. Sanders had made his decision, and now it was clear. He was no longer debating politics. He was attacking Jason Momoa's right to even see himself as part of this country. "Mr. Momoa likes to talk about values," he said in a calm but cutting voice. "But when it really comes down to it, where does his loyalty lie? When he looks in the mirror in the morning, does he see a true American or something else?" The air in the studio was sucked out. No one moved. This was no longer theater. It was a frontal assault on identity, belonging, on the very heart of what home means. The host opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't know whether to intervene or let history happen. In the control room, editors sat frozen. Glances darted between monitors and heads. "Are we really letting this go live?" one look asked another. Viewers at home held their breath, especially those who knew this feeling. Children of immigrants, people whose Americanness was constantly questioned. They knew this look, this suggestion that you can never truly belong if you weren't born in the right place, with the right name, with the right story. But Jason Momoa didn't move, didn't blink. He just looked at Sanders with that quiet, steely calm that used to make defenders tremble and now disarms demagogues. A look that said, "You've already lost, Mr. Sanders." "You should be very careful about the path you're taking," he said softly. But Sanders didn't stop. Maybe he didn't understand the warning. Maybe he just didn't care. "Mr. Momoa, you have served this country, and I respect that," he continued. "But you know," Sanders went on, his tone now condescending and sharp at the same time, "there's a difference between serving this country and truly understanding it. Some of us are born with this understanding. Others," he paused theatrically, "others try their whole lives to prove they belong." The sentence wasn't a shot. It was a surgical cut, precise, served with a smile behind which the blade was clearly felt. Jason Momoa nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. "I see," he said calmly. "So you believe American identity is inherited, not lived. It lives in the blood, not in our decisions. An interesting point of view, especially for someone who invokes the Constitution." Sanders' voice grew tenser. "I believe America should be led by people whose loyalty is never in question, people who never had to prove they belong." Restlessness stirred in the studio. There was isolated applause, murmuring, furrowed brows. The host received frantic signals in her earpiece. In the control room, they were debating wildly, cut to commercial or let it run, because something momentous was about to unfold. And then Jason Momoa did something completely unexpected. He smiled. Not a triumphant grin, not a smirk, but the quiet, knowing smile of a man who held the truth in his hand while his opponent was still playing with platitudes. "Mr. Sanders," he began, his voice as deep as a final judgment, "if we're going to talk about who really belongs, may I tell you a story?" Sanders blinked just once. His smile flickered. "It's about my family," Momoa continued, "and about yours. And by the end of this evening, every viewer will know whose loyalty is in question and who would be better off staying silent." Sanders visibly shifted in his chair, the first crack. "You see," Jason said, his voice now clearer, more certain, unshakable, "I've worked for years on security-relevant issues. You learn a simple rule there. Trust is good, but control is better. So when I found out I was going to be debating you tonight, I did my homework." A murmur went through the room. A cameraman stopped panning. The production assistant held his breath. Sanders's face lost color. "I don't know what you think you found," he mumbled, but his self-assurance had vanished. His voice betrayed him. "Oh, I think you know very well," Momoa countered. His smile deepened. "But don't worry, I'll tell everyone in a moment." He leaned forward, hands clasped, his gaze fixed on Sanders's face. The spotlights cast a harsh light on his forehead. The silence in the room was palpable. What came next would not only turn this debate around, it would go down in American television history. The luster that Bernie Sanders had worn at the beginning like armor was now fragile, visible, human. He had believed Jason Momoa would accept his attacks with dignity and move on. He hadn't counted on him coming armed with facts. "You know," he said, his voice calm but growing steadier, "when you work in my world, you learn early on. You don't have to be loud to be dangerous, you just have to be prepared." He reached into his jacket pocket and calmly pulled out a light gray folder. "It's all publicly available," he explained. "Anyone can look it up, but I don't think many Americans really know the truth about their family history." The camera zoomed in closer. The audience held its breath. In the control room, hands flew over mixing consoles, but no one dared to cut to a commercial. The ratings had gone through the roof, and all of America was watching. "Let's start with my story," Jason Momoa said calmly as he opened the folder with remarkable precision. "My parents came to this country without possessions, without connections, only with courage and the hope of building something through hard work. My father worked 3 jobs at once. During the day, he worked in construction. At night, he was a watchman. On weekends, he was a cleaner. My mother cleaned office buildings and took care of other people's children." His voice remained calm, but in his eyes a fire blazed that burned deeper than anger or outrage. "They didn't come to take. They didn't expect gifts. They believed in a single idea. If you work hard and follow the rules, you can make a better life for your child." He looked directly at Bernie Sanders. "My father never applied for welfare. He never asked for special treatment. He didn't believe this country owed him anything. He earned every dollar, every opportunity with his own hands, and with that money he sent me to school. The studio was now dead silent. Even Sanders's loudest supporters paused. When I was old enough to serve, I didn't hesitate for a moment, Momoa continued. I served, I took risks, I worked in cultural awareness programs. I appeared in disadvantaged communities, I dismantled networks that wanted to endanger this country. I was threatened, I was slandered. I spent nights in neighborhoods where my background could have been a death sentence. He took a long pause, letting the weight of this reality sink into the room. And all for one reason, to protect lives in this country. Then he turned not to Sanders, but directly to the camera, to the living rooms, the phones, the news feeds of the viewers. When Mr. Sanders tells me to go back to where I came from, he's not just talking to me, he's talking to every immigrant child, to every family that has ever toiled, believed, and sacrificed in this country. Applause swept through the audience. Some clapped while standing, but Jason raised his hand. I'm not finished yet, he said, because the most revealing story isn't mine, it's yours. Sanders flinched for the first time. Jason opened the folder completely and pulled out several sheets of paper. Mr. Sanders likes to talk about what true American values are. He's built his entire political brand on authenticity, patriotism, and being deeply rooted. But according to public documents, he held up the first page, your family came here from Russia, and that was in the early 1900s. A murmur went through the studio. That means Bernie Sanders is a second-generation American, just like me, just like millions of others. But Jason wasn't finished. His voice grew sharper, more targeted, more surgical. And now for the irony. Your family, he said, didn't come because of war or persecution. Not as refugees, not because of flight, but because they were looking for work. A few chuckles, a few horrified faces. Sanders's expression was frozen, but the color had drained from his face. That's right, Momoa said. The man who tells me to go back to where I came from is himself descended from Russian immigrants who came to this country to find work here. The murmuring grew. The irony was undeniable, but Jason had one more ace up his sleeve. And now it gets really interesting, he said, now completely in command of the room. Your great-grandfather, Mr. Isidore Sanders, was twice rejected by American immigration authorities. The reason, he couldn't support himself. No money, no prospects. Sanders tried to interrupt. That's absurd. You can't. But I can, Jason cut him off with a calm, final voice. Because according to the same records, he continued, your great-grandfather was exactly what you want to exclude today. A destitute, hopeful foreigner who wanted to bring something to this country, but who was initially not believed. Then he looked directly into the camera again. In other words, Isidore Sanders was exactly the kind of immigrant his great-grandson publicly rejects today. The studio exploded in applause, incredulous laughter, isolated cheers. But Jason calmly raised his finger. My favorite part is yet to come, he said. The immigration application that ultimately brought Isidore Sanders to America, Jason Momoa now said, was supported by a businessman of Native American background. With that sentence, the studio fell into absolute silence. That's right, Jason said, his voice now firmer, calmer, with growing strength. Your family is only here because someone who looks like me believed in the American dream enough to help them, to support them, to champion them. He turned directly to Bernie Sanders. When you told me to go back, you didn't just insult me. You insulted the people who made your own existence in this country possible in the first place. It was silent again. No movement, no sounds, just gazes, all directed at him. Jason Momoa stood there, unmoving, determined, and suddenly everyone in the room knew. This was no longer a moment, this was a turning point. Yes, exactly, he repeated. Bernie Sanders' family could only come to America because an immigrant, a so-called outsider, vouched for them and believed in them. He looked at him fixedly, unwaveringly. When you told me I don't belong here, you said it to the descendant of the man who made your family's life here possible in the first place. Even Sanders' supporters couldn't hide it now. Some shook their heads, others looked away in embarrassment. The irony was unmistakable, but Jason wasn't finished. "You want to talk about true Americans," he said, and now he stood up with the bearing of a general giving a final command. "Then let me tell you what true Americans do." He didn't have to shout, he just had to breathe. True Americans don't judge each other by the color of their skin, by their last name, or by their grandparents, but by their character, by their stance, by what they are willing to give to this country. He looked at him, without hatred, but without an iota of leniency. True Americans don't build careers on division and hate. They build legacies through courage, through truth, through a responsibility. The studio erupted, applause, cheers. Even some TV crew members spontaneously clapped. Jason Momoa let it rise. Then, with a single sentence, he brought it back to the point. "Do you know the difference between us, Mr. Sanders?" His voice was now quiet but penetrating. "My family came with nothing and gave everything to this country," he paused. "Your family came with nothing and taught their descendants to look down on others who did the same." A moment of silence, then thunderous applause again. "I have spent my entire adult life serving this country, in my art, in my volunteer work, in rooms that no one will ever see. And you have spent your years echoing your own kind of populism and then quieter, sharper, advancing your own career. So before you ever question someone's loyalty again, look in the mirror and ask yourself, what have you actually done to make America better?" He sat down calmly, composed, unassailable. Then, as if as an afterthought, he added, "I believe you wanted to say something about economic policy, Ms. Host." The studio exploded, this time with a standing ovation. The host tried to continue the debate, but she knew it. Everyone knew it. The debate was over. The direction had changed. That same night, Jason Momoa's speech went viral. Momoa fires back. True dignity and Sanders loses were the top trends on all platforms. Politicians, activists, and self-critics all spoke of one of the most powerful political moments of an entire generation. But the real wave came not through headlines, but through stories. Thousands of Americans shared their family histories of flight, of service, of belonging through choice, not birth. Bernie Sanders' image crumbled in days. Donors dropped out. Staff members left his team. The party distanced itself. His press conferences fizzled out. No one bought his explanations. The video had said it all. Jason Momoa had become more than just the winner of a television duel. He had become a symbol, a memorial for what America is truly made of. Quiet strength, earned respect, and the courage to stand for something greater. He hadn't shouted or provoked. He had simply spoken the truth and let it work. And so he reminded the country of something it had almost forgotten, that greatness doesn't come from your place of origin, but from your stance. And that evening, Jason Momoa didn't just win a debate. He reminded America of what it was always supposed to be. What we saw today was more than a debate. It was a moment of truth, raw, honest, and unavoidable. If stories like this move you, make you think, or challenge you, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to my channel now so you don't miss any of these intense political and emotional narratives. Every week we tell what others keep silent, unvarnished, profound, and with the courage for clarity. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, who you are is not determined by where you come from, but by what you're willing to stand for. What would you do? Write in the comments and subscribe for more stories.